If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to episode 27. Today we speak with two pillars of the science fiction, fantasy, and horror community, author and programmer Matthew Kressel and author-editor Catherine Lundoff for the second half. And before we get started, I do have one announcement I want to make to our general community and our listeners. After much discussion, we have decided that we will be splitting our audio columns off into their own mini episodes. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, this will shorten up our episodes. Two, it will make it easier to find what you're looking for if you're looking for something in our episodes. And three, that'll give us a little more freedom to schedule things and maybe even have more of those audio columns come out than we would normally have. So I just wanted to make that announcement before we got started. All right. So what's that, Diane?
Oh, no, I was just saying, that's cool, Yeah, we did talk about this, and, I'm looking forward to more opportunity to expand on those, actually.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea. I think our episodes were just getting really long, and I know, like, me personally, I start seeing those long episodes that are, like, hour and a half. Like, I start getting a little, like, I don't know if I want to listen to this podcast, so I'm sure other people feel the same way. So.
Yeah, probably.
All right, with that said, let's introduce our first guest here. His name is Matthew Kressel. He is a software developer and writer of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. His fiction has been nominated 3 times for a Nebula Award and once for a U.G. Foster Memorial Award. He has also been nominated for a World Fantasy Award for his former editorial and publishing work. His fiction has been translated into many languages, including Spanish, French, Chinese, Romanian, Russian, Czech, and Polish. Holy
nice.
Cow. Matt's short story, The Last Novelist, was a 2017 Nebula Award finalist, as well as a 2018 UG Award finalist. His short story, The Meeker and the All-Seeing Eye, was a 2014 Nebula Award finalist. And the short story, The Sounds of Old Earth, was a 2013 Nebula Award finalist. His work has also appeared in several years' best anthologies and received numerous honorable mentions. But it does not stop there. He has many short stories out there in the world in many different publications like Lightspeed, Nightmare, Tor.com, Clark's World, Analog, IO9.com, Beneath Ceaseless Skies. Like all the places.
All the places.
All the places.
All the places.
His debut novel, King of Shards, was hailed as a majestic, resonant, reality-twisting madness from NPR Books. And every third Wednesday, he co-hosts the Fantastic Fiction Reading Series at the famous KGB bar alongside veteran and super famous speculative fiction editor Ellen Datlow. And this is something I'm adding to his bio because he doesn't say it in here. He also is the creator of Moksha, which is the story submission program that basically all of the science fiction, fantasy, and horror magazines use these days. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks. You make it sound like I did a lot. I really don't feel like I do that much. But, when you put it all together like that.
It's kind of good to put that in perspective, right? Because you link it all together and it's like, no wonder I'm so tired all the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't kidding. Yeah. I wasn't kidding when I said you were a pillar of the community, Matt. I'm serious about that.
Yeah, it's kind of heavy. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I mean that's like a lot of years' work. So it's it's been a lot of work behind it. So it's many years of effort.
Sure, absolutely. And now you've got a new novel coming out, the sequel to King of Shards, Queen of Static, I believe, correct?
Yeah. Just came out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna. Yeah, so it's basically King of Shards came out in 2015, and got a lot of really good attention, and everyone's like, when are we getting the second book? When are we getting the second book? And it's kind of a long story. Like the publisher closed. I mean, they did a really good job with King of Shards. I have nothing bad to say about them, only good things. It was just like financially, the publisher couldn't sustain themselves. So
that's a story that we hear many times. It's a hard business. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was releasing Queen of Static on my Patreon for a while, like a chapter every week or two. Did that for a couple years, and that went really well. And then I was like, I'm going to release this as a full trade and ebook. And then that just came out like about a mid March, late March. So it's been steadily, the sales have been steadily increasing, because like I really didn't do that much marketing on it. I just sort of put it out there, and then people are like, oh my god, that the sequel's out. I was waiting years for this. So that's kind of cool. It's exciting.
It's awesome to hear that you have such great support. That's always really gratifying, I think. So tell us about it. Like, tell us, what you can for those who aren't maybe familiar with the series, right?
Yeah. So King of Shards is. So I was very inspired. I'm sure you all know of Saladin Ahmed, who did the Throne of the Crescent Moon, which was like Islamic themed science fantasy, and there's been Jewish-themed science fiction and fantasy, but not that much. Like, I didn't really see a lot of Jewish-themed epic fantasy. So I was really inspired by this myth. It's called the Lamed Vav. So the idea is that there's 36 hidden saints that sustain the world, and that if any of them were to cease being righteous, the world would be destroyed. And there's also this other myth that it's called like the Shattered Vessels. It's a Hasidic myth, and it originated, I believe, in the 17th century. And the idea is that ours is not the first universe, that God created other universes, but they were imperfect, and so they shattered. And all these little shattered pieces are the root of all evil in our world. So I took these two myths and sort of brought them together. So in King of Shards, it focuses on the story of Daniel, who's one of these Lamed Vavniks, one of these 36 people, doesn't know it.
Uh-oh.
And he's abducted by none other than Ashmedai, who's the king of demons, and brought down to a shard, a hell world, where he's basically told that there's a plot to kill all the Lamed Vav on Earth, and this will not only destroy Earth, but all of the other shards. And by the way, on these shards, this is where demons live and dwell. They dwell in absolute misery. So the first book is, trying to say without spoilers, it's basically Daniel's quest with Ashmedai, who's, by the way, a demon, so maybe he's not super trustworthy, and he teams up with a young Mason girl called Rana, who's just the most amazing artist and may or may not be able to create other amazing things. I won't spoil that. And also a woman named Marul Manaka, who is a witch who basically more or less broke into heaven and stole the names of the hidden Lamed Vav. And sort of, did something with them. So the first book is the story of how they may or may not have saved Earth. And the second book continues the story of that and continues basically where King of Shards left off. So trying not to spoil it for people who haven't read the first book yet.
Yeah, and I will say I'm honestly about 3/4 of the way through the first one, and I was kind of surprised, Matt. It's a little more horror oriented than I would have expected.
Yeah, I've gotten that.
If you're going to talk about the broken shards of previous world, I'm familiar with this myth. I expect horror. There'd better be horror if you're going to do that. I think that's cool.
there's definitely some dark elements of it. So, basically these demons are pissed. They're like, I sort of think of them like, look, we all live in a relatively affluent country, and there are people that grow up in poverty and suffering, and we kind of, at least I know in parts of my life, taken that affluence for granted. Mm-hmm. And I think that I was taking that metaphor to a bit more extreme in the book, where demons are basically like, look, we've been given the shit end of the stick. Like, we've been given these worlds that are basically broken, and we're pissed. Like, you have had this great, relatively easy experience, and we're always suffering. We live in a world where nothing lasts. Everything is transient. Everything just sort of collapses into the sands. And they're mad. So yeah, there's anger, and there's some darkness in there. I would say that Queen of Static is less horror and more urban fantasy. So a lot more of it takes place in more familiar areas without spoiling it. So it sort of becomes more of like an urban fantasy portal story in the second book. The first one is definitely more secondary world fantasy, and there's some horror in there. I couldn't help it.
Awesome.
I mean, just being very familiar with your work, I was, or at least your short work, I was surprised, because a lot of your short work is, just not horror oriented, or at least not stuff that I've read. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Much more science fiction-y and very humanist,
Yeah. I mean, I think there's certainly a humanist undercurrent in the book. I mean, I think that I'm a optimist at heart. I'm but I think I'm like, it's based in reality. Like, I'm not like necessarily a magical thinker. I don't think, if we just believe it'll happen. I think no, like, you have to really work for it. You can't just hope something good will happen. You have to make it happen. And I think that comes across in the book. And I think that it really is the central theme of the entire series. I mean, it is called the World Mender series. So. Right.
Sounds
but
awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't do a lot of horror these days.
Right. So now you're also writing a far future science fiction novel, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about that? And then when is the third book of the World Mender trilogy going to come out?
I was hoping you were going to ask that last question. So I started this far future. It started as a novella. My idea was to do a kind of Murderbot thing, like just have a series of novellas about this character. I call her Space Trucker Jess.
I love it already. I'm in.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, Space Trucker Jess. Are you kidding me? That's going to be great.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I'm Space Trucker Jess. I'm in. Yes. I'm like, that's cool.
Well, okay. No, I mean, that's... I submitted a novella with that name to a group of first readers, and a few of them had a viscerally negative reaction to that. So
what?
Yeah, like, I love that name. I thought it was a great name, but my working title right now is Starship Solutions. But yeah, so the premise of that is, I've had this idea in my head for a long time. So she's basically 16-year-old girl who she's with her father on a giant ring station, and he gets arrested. Like, so she's basically her and her father are basically grifters. She has this weird, strange relationship with her dad where she recognizes that he's pretty much an asshole. She doesn't want to live like him, but she tolerates him because that's all she has. What happens is he basically does this. He scams a bunch of union guys at the space station and gets arrested and gets thrown in prison. So she's got no one. She's got no money. She's got no housing. She's got nothing. So she decides to take a job as what's called a roach runner, which is basically a type of fixer, like mechanic. So her job is to basically, like, she works in the ship docks, and the ships come in, and they get calls. We need you to repair this ship. We need you to fix this hangar, etc. And she befriends like a couple other young people that work there, and she's basically saving up to buy her own ship, this giant ship called the Spark Mega Hauler. She wants to become a shipper. That's her dream. She wants to become a trucker. She wants to have her own ship, fly off into deep space, fuck her dad. But she loves her dad. She can't let him go. Mm-hmm. So she's been there about 6 weeks when the book starts, and she hasn't seen him in about 2 weeks. Like, she can go visit him in prison, and see him. So the book starts. She goes to work. She's like, oh shit, I gotta go see my dad. I'd rather go get drunk and watch like what they call a mech boar fight. It's like a sort of a bullfight with machines. Sure. Mm-hmm. And she's like, let me go see him. She goes down to the prison, and they're like, well, your dad's not here. Well, where is he? Is he in another wing? No, he's not on the station. What the hell do you mean he's not? I don't know. He's not on the station. So the story is a quest of finding out where her father went. And I will just say that it definitely goes galactic, and it definitely will blow your mind in all the best ways. Yeah, and like I just there are very few times in my life where I've felt like this character was a real person. Like in the sense that, like, when I sit down to write, the voice is already there. I don't have to force the voice. I don't have to like, well, what would she say now? Like, it just comes to me. I know her. She's a person, and she's like super smart. She's a foul mouth. She loves to drink and get high, but she's ultimately, at the end of the day, she's got this heart of like this just empathy for everyone, because she's suffered herself. Like, she's been through hell, basically, like really had this difficult childhood, and in some senses like wise beyond her years, because she's suffered this much. And so when she encounters other people who are in some ways lost like her, she's very caring for them. So I mean, that's a big thread of the story too. But yeah, it just gets very epic, and it's basically about how her trying to find out where her father went and why.
This sounds awesome. Tell me when this is done and out. I'm in. I love working class characters in science fiction, galactic space stories. I think that's always really cool, because I don't think that's going away, I think there will still be people repairing the ships in the greasy bowels of the docks, I think there will still be, grifters and people with hard luck stories, and I love it. Like, that's where I come from, right? I'm a blue collar writer, so I'm down. I want this so bad. And my chat apparently is totally in agreement with me, and they love the title Space Trucker Jess. So,
really? Okay, yes. All right. Well, the chat rules, audience rules. Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm excited about it too. So, I wrote a novella version of it, which was supposed to be the quote-unquote first book, like Murderbot size, like 35,000 words. Mm-hmm. And I sent it to Ellen Datlow, who's published a lot of my stories, and she's like, I love it. It's not a novella. She's like, this is a novel. You need to finish it. And I was like, okay. Mm-hmm.
Good editors do that. Yep.
Yeah, so that was 35,000 words. I'm now at around 87,000. So my goal is to finish it within 120. And I think I'm pretty close to doing that. I think I'm very near the end. So I think I can, finish it up in the next 25,000 words or so. But yeah, I'm super excited about this book. It's so much fun to write. Kind of mind-blowing. Oh, and it actually, I didn't even say this, it takes place in the world of some of my other stories.
That's cool.
Is this the Newman verse?
The Newmanverse, yes. So I've written like 5 or 6 stories in this world. Go on my website if you want to see links to them. But Saving Diego, Still You Linger Like Soot in the Air. The Last Novelist is there, but sort of more peripheral. And I've got a few others. They're listed on the site, but yeah, it's just been a lot of fun building this world out there, and I know exactly what to do when I sit down at the page. I know all the parts of the world where everything fits. It's really fun.
That's fun when that happens, and it's rare, I think, actually, as a writer, where all of that is just there and it comes together so easily. So that's cool that you're having such fun with it. That's great.
Thanks. Yeah, as far as Princess of Ashes, which is the sequel to The Queen of Static, I have it outlined. I haven't written it yet. Part of the reason was that, like I said before, like the original publisher closed down, and there wasn't an immediate need for me to finish it. And I was a little disappointed when the publisher closed down, and I kind of I needed to put it aside for a while. So yeah, because I had just finished like writing Queen of Static on deadline, and my wife will tell you I was working like morning and nights, like with the day job, and like working till like late into the night and not getting much sleep and just trying to finish it, and then really burnt out, and then finding out that the publisher was shutting down was just it took a while. I'm over it now, but
I get it. I really do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I have it outlined, and I actually have kind of an adjacent story, like one of the characters that appeared in the first book. There's a story about her that needs to be told, and it might not get into Princess of Ashes depending on how things play out. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, my friend Author Goddess in the chat. Authors plan, publishers laugh. Yep.
Yes.
Are there any questions from the chat while we're...
That's a good question. If there are questions, feel free to ask them. Preface them with the questions and a question in all caps, and that way we'll be sure to see it. Mostly a lot of support for the space trucker Jess story is what I'm seeing in the chat. So cool. That's awesome.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about your Newmanverse just for a second there, because we kind of just brought it up and then let it go. So the audience knows the Newmanverse is a collection of short stories, like you said, Matt. But the Newmans are kind of like these, I want to say godlike creatures, or at least these creatures that are kind of unknowable to humankind, but are able to manipulate things on a grand scale. Like, for example, just blow up a planet,
Yeah.
Yeah. Convenient.
Now we paint worlds is basically about that. So it's referenced in Saving Diego, and I think in Still You Linger Like Soot in the Air. So the Newmans are like these, like you said, these inscrutable godlike aliens. They live in the galactic voids because galaxies are quote unquote too hot for them. They say it's like more metaphorical. It's not actual heat that they can't go there, but so humans generally can't communicate with them because they're so different. And but there is a world on the outer rim that is near where the Newmans live, and that if you take this psychotropic drug called sweet gismus, you can communicate with them or commune with them, and they communicate often in cryptic metaphors, because it's like they are to us like we are to not even an ant, like to an amoeba. Like we are so far, they are so far above us that it's hard for us to comprehend it, but they are sentient and conscious and aware of us. So it's like Now We Paint Worlds is basically the first contact story of that. And some of the others, the Saving Diego and Still You Linger, like Sit in the Air, are stories that take place on this world called Gilder Nafan, which is basically this world on the Outer Rim where it's sort of this Judeo-Islamic society. They've kind of merged, which I actually talk about in Space Trucker Jess, a little bit of the origin of that. But anyway, they have this culture where they sort of shun technology and they spend their days meditating and trying to commune with these gods because they see them as like messengers or not quite angels, but messengers to godliness. And yeah, so it's kind of about people's experiences on those planets, on that planet, and interacting with these gods, and yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. Sounds awesome. We do have a question in the chat. Author Goddess would like to know: did I miss how the market research was done on the title? Right, referring to Space Trucker Jess and the fact that it was disliked.
Yeah, it was two people, first readers, when I sent them the novella version of the Far Future story. It was titled at that time Space Trucker Jess, and most people were like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great," and then two people were like, "Oh no, I don't like that at all." So I don't know. Everyone's tastes are different,
yep. So it's all individual. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, I really love Space Trucker Jess. My wife does too. So, but I also trust these first readers' opinions very much as well. So, and one of them, works for a big publisher and was doing marketing. So I was like, okay, all right, But you all think that Space Trucker Jess is a good title, then maybe that's what I should go with.
It's so hard, isn't it, to determine stuff like that? Like, I find that publishing is probably the most opaque business on the planet. Nobody really knows anything. We're all guessing, right? We have feelings and assumptions about what's going to work and what isn't, and we're not always right,
Yeah. And I also think, too, it's a matter of, like, finding the right audience.
That too.
Like there's certain, if you get your stuff out there at the right time with the right audience, then that's all that matters. And there's so many audiences out there, right? So there's so many different groups for different tastes, and it's just a matter of like appealing to that when people are like ready to hear it. And I think more than anything, it's timing.
Yeah. And that can be very difficult to predict, for sure.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
A few years ago, I remember there was just like vampire novels everywhere.
Yup.
So true. So true. And not everything's compared to Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Or Wheel of Time. Okay, so it is 3:30. So, question for you, Matt. Would you like to stick around, or do you need to go? Because
I can stick around if it's up to you. I mean, I would like to hear Catherine. So yeah, I'll stick around.
Okay, cool. It looks like she just went off, but she was on a second ago. So as soon as she gets back on, we'll introduce her. But while we wait, I have also noticed that you've been doing a lot of artwork lately, like visual art.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't recall you doing visual art like 5 years ago. Maybe I just didn't know about it. Is that a recent thing? What's inspired you to get into it?
It's recent. So I always loved to draw, but I was a really slow artist. Like and I would get to the point where I was like, this is really great. And then I'd do something and mess it up. I'm like, God damn it. So 3D art is like the perfect medium for me because I can just try everything, and then if it doesn't work, you just undo it. So I basically taught myself Blender, which is like a free 3D program, which was pretty much my project for the first 6 months of the pandemic because work slowed down. I'm an independent contractor. I didn't get a lot of work, and was pretty much what I did for that period, and then I just fell in love with it, and I started getting like better each time at it, and learning new things each time, and yeah, I mean they're all on my website if you want to check them out.
Awesome. Yeah, we've linked your website in the chat before, but I'll link it again. We have another question here from Author Goddess who says, what is your, and this, I know this one could end up being a long question. What is your number one tip on these 3 things for both new and established writers? Writing, publishing, and marketing.
Number one tip. Writing is just keep at it. Just keep doing it. Publishing, I would say, send it out. Like so many people I know are like, well, I don't know if it's ready yet. I don't know if it's ready. Send it out. Send it out. Because like just send it out and start the next thing. And then what was the third one? Writing, publishing,
and marketing.
And marketing. I have no idea. Like we just said. Marketing. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I've tried everything. Some things work, some things don't. I think it's a mystery. It's one of those unknown things, like like wave particle duality. I have no idea.
A lot of my audience are also writers. So yes. And they're like, marketing, yes. I don't understand marketing. I have no idea. Sometimes, depending on the weather, I think some things hit and some things don't. I have no idea. I'm glad to know that, people who are farther ahead in their career than I am are also confused. That actually makes me feel better.
I'm always confused if that helps. So.
I understand that completely as well. But our second guest may be able to enlighten us on that topic a little bit. Catherine Lundoff is here. Let me intro her real quick, and then she can enlighten us about marketing, maybe. Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
Hi there.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Catherine is the publisher at Queen of Swords Press, a Minneapolis-based small press specializing in fiction from out of this world. Queen of Swords publishes books by A.J. Fitzwater, Alex Axe, Jenny Goloboy, and Rem Wigmore. Our listeners should know who that is. Heather Rose Jones and Michael Merriam, among others. She is also an award-winning writer of 3 novels and 5 short story collections, and editor of 3 anthologies. Her short fiction and essays have appeared in such venues as Fireside Magazine, Nightmare Magazine, the Sifwa blog, and several World of Darkness anthologies. She also teaches classes at the Rambo Academy, Clarion West Online, and Springboard for the Arts. So, welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So,
and I mean that literally now that we figured out the Discord thing.
I know, right?
Right.
Thank you for being patient with it and figuring it out. That's awesome.
No problem. No problem at all.
But no worries. One time we interviewed a musician, this punk musician that I know, and we had this horrible disconnect where we couldn't get him on, and we were kind of continuing running with the other guests at the same time, and I'm dialing his phone number and then talking to his agent and talking to him on a different phone line. It was insane. But we did get him on. So.
We did. Yep. That was fun. I remember that. Yep.
So Catherine, it was nothing like that, so no worries.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And by the way, Matt, in our live format, if you have any questions or comments and want to jump in, feel free.
All right.
So Catherine, we were just talking about marketing. We had a question from the audience about how to market your books effectively. Maybe you can answer that question as a publisher.
Well, I have thoughts. I have lots of thoughts. One option, of course, is to have a whole lot of money. So if you start out by winning the lottery, that helps a lot.
Okay, but
there's many forms of the lottery, so that's just sort of put that in a bucket of options, for as something to work toward. If you are not winning the lottery and are not likely to do so soon, the other option is a great deal of energy. So the beauty of being a small press publisher is that I can go out and do the things that my authors would rather not do, namely pop up in people's feeds and go, "Hey, have you read this yet?"
Yeah,
which I'm capable of doing over and over and over again all week long. as anyone who follows me can attest. A lot of it is about repetition. I mean, people need to see references, and usually slightly different references to a book a few times before they'll pick it up. Right. So, repeating things, making sure you've got a set of images to work with. I dabble a little bit in the video thing. I have not yet grit my teeth and embraced TikTok. It's on the horizon. I just haven't tackled it yet. So now I make really terrible videos for the Queen of Swords Instagram. People love those. I show up by way of stuffed animals around. There's pictures of the ceiling. There's pictures of the floor. People think it's hilarious. So, welcome to the unboxing video. If you can find the book in the box, you're doing really well. So there's something to be said for also not taking yourself deadly seriously when you're doing promotion, I think. Because I think people find that more appealing than, say, an endless stream of buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. You've got to be providing other kinds of content. So, the advantage I have as a publisher, as opposed to if I was just representing myself, is I've got multiple people, and I can go out and say, for example, today, Heather Rose Jones, whose novella we just published, is at FogCon doing a reading from the novella we just published. Nice. How cool is that? We're multitasking today. Next week she's going to be on a different podcast doing more readings. Somebody else is doing something else. AJ and Rem are in New Zealand. They have their own cycle of events. And we're able to kind of swap things out. Coming up in the next couple of months, Jenny Galaboy and I will be teaching at Clarion. We're also teaching at the Loft Literary Center, so we've got kind of a road show going on. So we're doing a lot of that kind of stuff. So, it's helpful to kind of think of marketing as an organic process. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, no one thing by itself is going to magically sell all of your books forever and ever.
Right.
I gotta say, as a solidly middle-aged white guy, TikTok kind of terrifies me, to be honest. And our old producer Rachel every now and then will ping me like, "So have you thought about TikTok? Have you thought about this?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I don't know. I don't know if I can handle TikTok. I feel like I'm maxed out as it is. You know what I mean?"
But there's this whole thing about
the opportunity to entertain
now,
people,
right? I've been looking into this. I've been thinking about getting on TikTok myself for that reason, right? There's a whole thing about book talk, right? And different bookstores and whatnot are featuring stuff that's been talked about on Book Talk, right? Yeah. So it might be worth it right now because it's just becoming big, So
yeah. The thing to think about, though, when you're looking at stuff that's just becoming big, and I'm going to use a really specific example from science fiction and fantasy right now, is it's like comparing your career trajectory to the success of Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of preconditions you're probably not going to be able to match. So yes, there are people getting a ton of attention on TikTok, on Instagram, on those different book channels. Generally speaking, those are from large presses. It's the same couple of books and authors over and over again. Mm-hmm. So go into it kind of, expecting, yes, I can use this to build my audience, but maybe not, I'm going to be an overnight success with this one thing. Just saying.
Yep, makes perfect sense. I also did a Kickstarter for my book. It went really well. I was nowhere near Brandon Sanderson, of course. Right? So there you go. Yeah.
I have been in this field for a couple of decades now, and nothing I have ever done has ever done that well.
There you go.
Even the things that have done quite well have not done that well. So it's just, it's a perspective thing. So.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah.
Oh boy! Well, it's funny you brought the Brandon Sanderson thing, and now I'm like my thoughts are derailed. But I'm gonna get back on focus here. So you run Queen of Swords Press, as we've been discussing, and you've been having a really great couple of years here. The Voyages of Sinrak the Dapper won the Sir Julius Vogel Award. and was also runner-up for the Rainbow Awards, right? And now Fox Hunt by Rem Wigmore is up for the Julius Vogel, and so our listeners know that Julius Vogel is like the Hugos for New Zealand, right? Tell us like the focus of your press and just like a little more about your press in general.
Okay, our focus. Well, there's the focus from the business plan that I wrote 6 years ago, and then there's now. So the focus from the business plan that I wrote 6 years ago was science fiction, fantasy, maybe a little bit of horror. I wanted to have a sideline that focused on, science fiction, fantasy, and so forth with historical elements, and we'll get there eventually. What happened instead was that it evolved into things Catherine likes.
Right.
Given that Catherine has super eclectic tastes, is not as bad as it sounds. I should also note that one of the differences between now, the press is now 5 years old, a little over 5 years old. I launched in 2017. Is that I have interns and an assistant and so forth. So I have other voices in the mix. So it's not just me looking at something and going, yes, no. It's, there's a small staff that weighs in on stuff. Mm-hmm. So, for example, my assistant was the first one to read Fox Hunt by Rem Wigmore and immediately poked me and said, "This is a Queen of Swords press book." And of course, my immediate reaction was, and then I read it and I'm like, yeah, totally right.
Nice.
You're going to pass on saying that forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had Rem on, actually, great guest. Really enjoyed the conversation. It was very cool, and I haven't read it yet, but it's on my list because it sounds awesome.
Well, we're putting out the sequel this year. The plan is to have that out in December.
Oh, I better get on with it then, eh?
I was just about to say. So, speaking of that, so you already answered my first question. When is it coming out? In December. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about it?
No? It's going to pick up a couple of months after Fox Hunt ends. Bear in mind that Rem is doing some edits right now, but there's dual protagonists. So it's not just from Orpheus's perspective; it's going to be from other characters' perspectives as well. You're going to get to see a lot more of the world building, a lot more of the world that Rem has constructed that first appears in Fox Hunt. There's a bit more of a romantic subplot than there was in the first book. So it's really, I think, it's going to be, for readers who've been really clamoring to see more of those characters, more of that world, I think this is going to be an amazing, amazing chance to see more of that. Leah Rose has signed on to do the cover again. I should mention, speaking of the Sir Julius Vogels, that Leah is up for Best Artist for the cover for Fox Hunt right now.
Fantastic.
If you've ever seen Leah's work, it's amazing. And she does so much amazing work. I'm like, really? Our cover? Yes! But anyway, I hope she wins all the stuff because it's richly deserved.
That is awesome. Very awesome.
So the other books we're putting out this year, we just put out Heather Rose Jones' Beauty and the Beast retelling, The Language of Roses, which is part of our mini-series. Those are either linked short stories or novella-length works, about 40,000 words. So that just came out a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact. Got lots of nice word of mouth on that one. This summer, we're going to be doing a re-release. Michael Merriam, who's a local author here in the Twin Cities, one of the things that I've started in the last couple of years is I wanted to do a line of science fiction, fantasy, and horror by authors from the upper Midwest that might or might not be queer-specific, depending on what they were coming up with. So Jenny Goloboy's novel, obviously Aliens, which is funny science fiction that includes like this wild car chase through the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, talking corgis, a whole bunch of other things. And it's Jenny talking about how people process immigration. And in this case, the immigrants are aliens, literally from other planets, and how that can work out when it's not an invasion. Basically, she wanted to come up with a different narrative on that. This summer we'll be releasing Mike Merriam's Last Card at Noon Station, which it's set in Minneapolis at about 2006, 2007, and it features the ghost of the old streetcar line. There's an overlap into both Fae and Welsh mythology and the afterlife of Welsh mythology. There's a very sweet romance wrapped up in there as well. And it's going to be terrific. I'm really excited about this. For a lot of people, if they got into urban fantasy, they often got into it through Emma Bull's War for the Oaks, which is set in Minneapolis in the 80s, and which is just this, massive love song to Minneapolis in the 80s. And this is a much more updated version. So, it's not a version of it, but it I think for people who are like, well, what about something closer to now, with that same very, gritty urban feel, it's got a lot of that. So.
Sounds awesome. Lots of good stuff coming up, obviously.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah. Author Goddess says, Catherine sounds lovely to work with. I kind of wish I wrote stuff more to that style. Yeah.
Well, give it a few years. Who knows? Maybe we'll expand.
So, one other thing we had been chatting about before you came on was you're talking about greening your office.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty interesting. Would you mind discussing that?
I would love to discuss that. Okay, so we have a home office, which makes things a little easier. But when we bought the house a zillion years ago, one of the things that I really wanted to do, our house is over 100 years old, was to look at ways to make it more energy efficient, both for the fact that, it cost a mint to heat this place when we first got it. And, with the goals of reducing our carbon footprint and so forth. So we, just kind of very slowly went through project after project over the years. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I got in the habit, I do a yearly blog post called The Greening of Our Lives out on Dreamwith, in which I talk about what we've done in the last year to reduce our carbon footprint, to reduce the amount of waste we're producing, all of that good stuff. And since, again, home office, so anything we're doing with the house then spills over into Queen of Swords.
Of course.
So, we've done stuff like 2 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, we had the attic remodeled and re-insulated. The year before that, we had a new high-efficiency furnace put in. So we cut our gas use 40% total for the house. We recycle a lot. We compost a lot. So, a box of books comes in, I store the books in our containers, and then the box goes out to any neighbors who are moving. We're part of the Neighborhood Buy Nothing Club. Mm-hmm. The whole house is wind powered. All of our electricity comes through wind power because that's a program that's available to us here in the Twin Cities.
Oh, that's cool.
We have an organic yard. I'm in the process of essentially turning it into a little tiny prairie because I have figured out that making it a little tiny prairie means a lot less mowing and work. So,
nice.
So since the milkweed really likes the side yard, I'm like, we just make the whole bee lawn and get it over with. That'd be really handy.
Sensible. Yep.
So, I converted our grass to clover. We have a rain barrel. We have pretty much, most of our equipment is either, as high efficiency as we can afford or is electric. So it's wind powered as well. So the press kind of benefits from all of the stuff that we've been working on. And like I said, there's annual goals. So every year, I set a new couple of goals and work toward it. Mm-hmm. So it's made it's made a substantial difference in how much waste we produce. We have things like citywide composting. We have single sort recycling, so we have some stuff that not everybody has depending on what urban area you live in. But we've been able to kind of work with those. So yeah, we're pretty minimal waste, as far as that kind of stuff goes. And, working on reducing the plastic. walking, all that good stuff.
Question for you, for somebody, somebody else who has, a second business or a side hustle, as they call it these days. What do you think would be an effective way to really get started on greening their side hustle?
I'd start with something, relatively small and easy because it's easier to get used to. So, it could be something like, do you recycle the print cartridges from your printer? What do you do with scrap paper? Like in our case, we cut it up and we use it for the equivalent, for writing notes on, for example. Is there something that you're using regularly that you can maybe get from a better source? Is it something that, could be anything from, an organization that's doing something, of environmental benefit of some kind to, can you get something recycled? Can you get something used? Can you, what can you change? So I would say that it's always best to start off with something, relatively compact and manageable that you're doing regularly, because it's an easier way to kind of ease into it. So like when we first bought the house, the first thing we did is we bought a bunch of what were then compact fluorescent light bulbs. Now, of course, we'd be using LEDs, but every single time a bulb burned out, we replaced it with a compact fluorescent. Cool. Much less energy. They last a lot longer, all that good stuff. The washer and dryer were, when we bought the house, like 30 years old. So when they had to be replaced, which happened not long after buying the house, we got these what were then really super high efficiency, a washer and dryer they're actually made in New Zealand, interestingly enough. But lower gas usage, lower water usage, everything's monitored. And there's there's simpler stuff. Like if you switch to, a coffee maker that requires things to be measured and doesn't use something like single-use pods, if you're not using single-use pods, that's something. But the fact that you have to measure things means that you're wasting less.
That's interesting, but I understand that. That makes sense from a psychological perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, I'd say pick something, pick small things, get pens you can refill, things like that. Just little things here and there. So you're gradually kind of easing into what you can do, and then see, if there are things that you can and want to ramp up to. Like I would absolutely love to have put solar panels on the house, but at the time we were getting too much shade. And I looked at the numbers and it's like, okay, so the benefit that we would get from solar panels versus the benefit that we would get from ripping out the ancient octopus furnace that was coated in asbestos and getting the attic remodeled and re-insulated was such that I was like, yeah, no, we're doing that.
Right. For sure.
And like I said, I mean, it's made a huge difference. And so, I've got my eye on the next couple of things that, may be doable, but we'll see how it goes.
A question in the chat here. A writer wants to try selling you a story and says, is historical fantasy of interest to Queen of Swords Press?
I'm sorry, I missed you cut out a little bit.
Historical fantasy. Is that something that Queen of Swords Press would take an interest in?
Yeah, in general. Of the things that I have spent the last 5 years and 3 months learning super well, there are books that are an easier sell to our existing audience, as opposed to books that we might be able to sell someday.
Gotcha.
So, our existing audience, they come to us by and large looking for stories that feature LGBTQ characters, which is a pretty broad range right there. They go for certain kinds of things. Like people are starting to come to us for solar punk. So I'm really glad we're doing, Brem's next book. And I think that AJ's book, The Voyages of Sinrak the Dapper, would also speak to a lot of those same readers. We're eclectic enough that we don't have branding in the sense of, these are exactly the sort of books that we do, and you can always find these sort of books right here. And I don't know that we ever will.
Cool.
So, a fair amount of stuff is what comes in that I look at and go, man, I am so excited about this. I want to be able to sit behind a table, virtual or in person, for the next X number of years, collaring people at events and going, you need to buy this book.
That's awesome. And I love that you're open-minded about what you're willing to look at, too. That's great. It's hard to find a publisher like that these days. Most of them, have a brand, right? And if you, my perception and experience, right? So, it's individual. Take it with a grain of salt. But, they've got this idea about what they want to do, right? And if it on the first page, they think that what you're doing isn't what they're specifically looking for within this box, then they don't want your book, right? And that's disappointing. That really limits what people can do creatively. It, limits expanding on the genre. It, it's not good. It's not good for anything except maybe the bottom line. And that, has a limit, right? So, yeah. So cool.
Yeah, it's worth, noting that I came into publishing with a background as a bookseller and as an author with a fair number of publications out. So there were things that I already knew how to do coming into it that sometimes people don't know when they first get into small press publishing within the field.
Right.
Which is not to say that there aren't plenty of things I still don't know how to do. We'll put TikTok aside.
Time. Yep.
In general. So, a lot of it is what people feel comfortable with, what they think they can sell. One of the reasons that, small presses go in and out of business, with such a great degree of frequency, especially if you're looking at something like horror, when the blow-ups are really spectacular lately.
They have been. Yes.
Yeah, there's some real doozies in there. Is that sometimes people are going into it without very much experience. Being a publisher sounds cool. I think I'll try that. And being a publisher is cool. However, there's a lot more work involved in it than that.
Yeah.
People go into it without business plans. And I think, even if you're looking at, developing an indie career, I would say that it is worthwhile to take at least a look at some of the books and resources that are out there if you don't want to take classes. Like before I launched, the Small Business Administration has an arm here called Women Venture, which is focused on women in small business. So I spent, X number of weeks getting certified through their program before I even launched. So I already went into this looking at things like profit margins and bookkeeping and all of that kind of stuff, which is not to say I haven't learned a great deal in the time that I've, been more hands-on with it. But I think that there's certain advantages to going into it with a business mindset.
Yeah.
And
the fact is, it is a business. It's unfortunate that, I get that, right? Like creativity can only exist in our capitalist world if it's capitalist, right? So you have to treat it like a business. You have to recognize there's a product and you have to sell that product, right? I'm not begrudging anybody that. That makes a lot of sense, right? I'm just glad that, you've decided that your product this is something that makes me really excited rather than this is something that fits this formula. That's cool.
Yeah, like I said, some of that was kind of a growth thing. The classic example is we did a collection of fantastical pirate stories a couple of years ago. Awesome. It's an anthology called Scourge of the Seas of Time and Space. And when I went into it, I was like, okay, yay, fantastical pirate stories. I've edited a couple of anthologies. I can stand to read a whole bunch of pirate stories and we'll be fine. Pirates, they're everywhere. I made it, it was all genders, all orientations, any time period. They could be in space, they could be on Earth, whatever. As long as there were pirates, we'd take a look at it. And we got just wildly eclectic things, but we got wildly eclectic things that were just brilliant. So it's everything from one of the early Sinrak stories that AJ wrote. And by the time we got up to the end, now I'm going to take a story about a talking capybara pirate captain.
Awesome.
Now pretty much anything goes. Got this brilliant piece by an author in Taiwan that's set in a post-apocalyptic New York, where the pirates are all former taxi cab drivers that have, water barges, and they're it's an amazing story, and I've never seen anything by that author since, and I really hope that he decides to do something eventually. But we got, pieces from authors in India, we got pieces from authors in the US, the UK, Malta, just, all over the place, Singapore. Just some really great stuff. Ashley Deng, who works with Flights of Foundry on both their blog and on the Dream Foundry blog and Flights of Foundry, the convention. We published her first short story in there.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So just some really amazing stuff. But there was this magical moment when I was reading the stories, and I remember just kind of throwing my hands up and going, okay, we're just going to wing it from this point. Anything we really like goes in.
That's awesome. Brilliant.
All right, everybody. So we have to start wrapping it up. It is 4:00 here. We do have a couple questions that we ask our guests every single podcast. So the first question is, what is bringing you hope right now? So what order do we want to do this? Catherine, do you just want to go first and then have Matt follow you up? Is that all right?
Sure. What is bringing me hope right now? I think that, it's easy to be really overwhelmed by big picture stuff. I think there's a lot of micro level change and things that are happening small scale that give me some grounds for optimism. I had retweeted something that somebody posted the other day, and it was a meme somebody created that says something to the effect of, people talk about hope like it's this delicate thing made out of spider webs, but it's not. Hope has blood on her knuckles, the grit of cobblestone in her hair, has just spit out a tooth, and is getting back up for another go.
That is so us. That's brilliant. I love that
it's
so
brilliant.
much.
It's brilliant, and that I think expresses how I think about hope. There's an element of endurance to it as well, and I think that if we can hang on to that, that is how we get to something better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
What about you, Matt?
I just want to say I really love that, Catherine. That was amazing. I think for me, I think that, echoing Catherine, like it's if you look at like social media, it's just like, oh my God, such horrible things. And there are like obviously incredibly horrible things happening in the world right now. But the United States, for example, you're talking about greening your office. I think it was in 2021 we generated, I think it was more recently than that. I think it was like last month. 18% of electricity in the United States was generated by wind and solar, which is almost 20% of our electricity. Now, of course, it needs to get to 100%, right? But that's a lot more than it was.
And a good one,
it's
too.
a lot more than it was. And, I think, this, embargo of Russian oil and gas is actually accelerating the transition to renewables in Europe, which, in the long term, will just help everybody. And, I think, in terms of just, I see a lot more awareness in some of the environmental groups that I'm on of like rewilding. So like this is something that I'm really into and fascinated with. I live in a really crowded city. I'm in New York City. There's not a lot of green space. But anytime I find an empty lot that someone's not touching, I'll throw a few native seeds in there. Maybe some of them will grow. Maybe some bees will come by next year. stuff like that, and I'm seeing, young people really into rewilding, buying just acres of grassland and converting it into wild prairie, things like that, like these kind of grassroots things. I'm looking around even in my neighborhood, I'm seeing solar panels just on roofs in Queens. It's like, it's coming, it's slowly coming. And I think that, we're going to see more and more of this, like Ford, one of the biggest auto companies is going all electric, so I think we're seeing a lot of positive change in terms of the environment. Obviously we have a long way to go in terms of, our relationship to each other, but it's at least those things I think are positive.
That is awesome. Can I throw something in here? Something I noticed that since our last podcast that it just made me so happy, and I don't know how many other people have taken note of this. 90% of the social media fascist assholes really are Russian troll bots. We know this now because they all went away for about most of a week right after the war in the Ukraine broke out because they were so busy trying to win that propaganda war that they stopped with all the other nonsense. And it's never quite caught up since. They just don't get the retweets they used to get. That makes me really happy. That kind of restores my sense, my faith in human nature. It makes me go, yeah, there really aren't that many people out there who are like this. This is just being artificially inflated by people with political goals. This is more, real people are more like, no. And that's great. I don't know. Like it makes me so happy to know that. I just laugh at the ridiculousness now because it was obvious. There was halcyon days of, about a week there on Twitter where every conversation was beautiful.
Yeah.
I miss it, but it's still not as bad as it was before that week. So that's great.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. Matt, where can we find you and what projects do you want to promote? What's coming up for you soon?
Yeah, sure. So, you can find pretty much everything about me on my website, matthewkressel.net. I'm on Twitter at Matt Kressel, and I'm also on Facebook. Let's see, work coming out. I have a short story called White Roses in Their Eyes, which is coming in an anthology called Other Covenants, Altered Histories of the Jewish People. So it's basically an alternative Anne Frank, who didn't die. And Queen of Static, obviously, is out. And I can't tell you where yet because the ink's not dry, but I co-wrote a novella with Mercurio de Rivera. It's called Threat Assessment. And that's going to be in a publication you've all heard of, but I can't tell you which yet.
Ooh, secret.
Well, because the ink's not dry. That's the only reason.
Gotcha.
Catherine.
Okay, well, I've already talked a little bit about Queen of Swords Press. You can find out about our upcoming projects either through our newsletter, which you can sign up for at queenofswordspress.com. We are also QOS Press on Twitter and Instagram, and Queen of Swords Press on Facebook. For me personally, I've got a couple of short stories coming out this year and working on a couple of new novels, including a new menopausal werewolves novel.
Ooh, love it. I'm there.
Excellent. So the next couple, there's two of them out already, just saying.
Okay, all right.
So the next couple of short stories, I've got a short story coming out in a couple of months in an anthology of queer weird Western stories.
Oh, cool.
And so that'll be out in August, I believe. I just had an essay accepted for Divergent Terror. It's called Gothic Horror, Edward Gorey and Me. And it's personal essays about how we got into writing and or reading horror. And it's basically my How Awesome is Edward Gorey? Let Me Tell You.
Nice.
And then I have a sideline in writing Sherlockiana, so I've got a story coming out next month in Sherlock Holmes and the Occult Detectives. This is volumes 3 and 4. I had a story in the first set as well. And yeah, So that's the most recent stuff that's coming up. I mentioned earlier that Jenny Galaboy and I were going to be teaching a class at Clarion West Online. That will be on June 5th, and it's a class in which an agent and a small press publisher demystify some of the relationship both between agents and publishers, as well as what either of us do in our respective realms, and how that plays out when you're looking for what to do with your book. And it's free.
Cool.
Everyone out there should sign up for it.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for coming on, you two. We greatly appreciate it. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you both.
Thank you. This was great.
So, and before we go, just let me remind everybody, if you like what we're doing, we have a Ko-fi account. That's Kofi. Just go and search If This Goes On. Don't panic. Don't panic with parentheses. You will find us. And we also have a Patreon if you really love what we're doing and you want to support us long term. Just go to patreon.com/ifthisgoeson. And we are there. We've got all kinds of tiers and stuff. Let's see. I don't know. Kat offers discounts to her classes, which includes Catherine's teachings as well. What else do we have out there? Let's see. I do 5-minute book reviews out there, where I go a little deeper than I do on our regular book reviews. We have a Discord. Patrons can also vote on guests. By the way, I don't know if I even mentioned this. Matt is one of the people our patrons voted to have on the show. So there you go.
Oh, exactly.
Oh, wow.
Good choice.
I guess I forgot to tell you that. So. All right, and that's it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. This episode of If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited and produced by me, Alan Bailey. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower. Additional music is by Christopher Snydrowski. And outro music by Sable Aradia, also known as Diane Morrison. Intro by Dave Robinson. A special thanks to our guests, Matt Kressel and Catherine Lundoff. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.